Welcome to A4NB4Y. Welcome to the A4NB4Y podcast, the Legend of Zelda theme podcast, where we go chapter by chapter through games. This chapter of our podcast is not in a game. This is between games. We just recently finished our Minish Cap season, and we are heading headlong into the Wind Waker season. I am Ryan Fonzie, a landlubber extraordinaire, and with me, as always,
I'm Anthony, and I'm the creatine in your body that helps you with the water transportation.
And I'm Captain Hook. I'm looking for that Peter Pan. Have you seen him anywhere, Shmee?
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 Shmee.
I hear they're ticking again, Shmee.
Okay. So welcome everyone to our in-between-isode. This is the one where we talk about what we're about to do, but we're also going to try to do a rank and recap as long as we remember. If we don't, I'll cut this. Don't worry. And in the meantime, we wanted to talk about this game that we are getting into. I did a little bit of just refreshing for myself. Went and watched, actually, it's another podcast that I had never heard of before doing this. I ran into this really good episode on the development of the Wind Waker by the Legendary Adventures podcast. It was very thorough. It went over everything from the Space World presentation that got everybody excited for a realistic Zelda, all the way to release, pretty much, talking about what kind of challenges the developers faced, what their inspirations were, and just some really cool background on how the game came to be what it was. So they did a really great job. I actually would recommend that you go listen to that episode because he goes into a lot of things that we're just not gonna. We've done an episode about like the developers of Zelda and kind of how that affected the games and kind of made that. So there are definitely some through lines, some things we've talked about before, but I think they just did a really great job over there. So I don't want to try to rehash all of that. That being said, there was one point that they brought up that I thought was particularly interesting. And that was some of the artistic inspiration of the game. During somewhere mid-episode, they talk about how the developers, both Miyamoto and Aonuma, were fans of Toei animation and like Miyazaki-style animation, which is something that if you're a fan of like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, probably won't come as a surprise to you, as a lot of the imagery used in those games, in those cutscenes, you can actually find references almost like shot for shot to some more recent like Studio Ghibli films. But this is actually, there was a specific callback to a 1971 Toei animation film that Miyazaki was the writer on, called Animal Treasure Island. And so I went and watched this movie. I know that I mentioned it to you guys, but I don't think either of you actually watched it.
No.
I'm too busy looking for Peter Pan.
Right. So Peter Pan's not in it, but it is a really good, for what it is, it's a very good like children's animated movie. It's like an hour 18 long. Nothing crazy happens. I mean, cartoon violence maybe here or there, but nothing like nothing gory.
Be still my beating heart. Cartoon violence on our podcast?
There is a psychedelic like dream scene in the movie.
Oh, snap.
Comes out of nowhere. Two of the characters are just talking about the future they're gonna build with the treasure they find, and suddenly it breaks into like a music video with a ship on a road covered in babies. It's really weird.
Covered in babies.
Amazing. I gotta
It's so
YouTube this.
strange, but it's it was 1971. I really don't know what happened there. But aside from that one scene, as I was watching this film, I mean, it's almost like the creative team over at Nintendo sat down and watched it together before they started doing the artwork or something, because it is bonkers how many similarities there are. Part of that just comes from them doing a similar period type like design, like trying to take inspiration from a certain, age of exploration. But it was definitely a little bit like I was sitting there. I literally just had my notebook out. Every time I saw something, I would just write something down, like taking notes.
I mean, there's a long enough year gap there that you could just pretty much call it probably an homage, yeah?
Yeah, I mean,
being like giving respect to
30 years in between.
Yeah, right. It's not easy, that's like this was amazing. We're gonna call back to this. This is part of what we grew up on. This is the inspiration that led to where we at.
Yeah, the movie is so, I don't want to just call it old, but I couldn't find it on a regular streaming service. Instead, I found it on archive, like .org or something like that. Maybe archive.net. I don't remember.
No, it's .org.
It is .org. Yeah, archive.org. So it doesn't cost anything to watch. You just straight up Internet Archive. It's there. I don't know if that's just because the studio didn't preserve it or nobody held rights to it or something. I'm not sure how that all went down, why it's on the archive website, but it is. You can just go Google it and watch it if you want. And if you like Wind Waker, like at all, I would recommend it because the movie will remind you of Wind Waker.
No Netflix needed, matey.
Yeah. And you don't need to be a pirate either. It's just there.
Yeah.
So I marked down, I made like a whole list of just similarities that I saw when I was watching. And I want to start just pretty much listing some of these things out. I'll just try to be quick because if you haven't seen the movie, this will all sound like nonsense. If you have seen the movie, you'll be like, oh yeah, I did see that. But right off the jump, you meet Jim, because this is, Animal Treasure Island. It's based on the Treasure Island novel. I believe it's Robert Louis Stevenson wrote it in 1883, and it's been the story has been adapted so many times. You probably know at least 2 versions of Treasure Island that came out of the 1970s to 2000.
The Wind Waker is an homage of an homage.
Yeah.
This is homageception.
Something like that. Animal Treasure Island is a Japanese cartoon animal version of Treasure Island.
Ew.
It's a pretty loose adaptation, but right off the jump, we meet Jim, and Jim Hawkins, right? Who looks a lot like a dark-haired Link. Like if you look at, he's even got like the little tuft on the top that Link has when he's not wearing his hat in the game. I should mention that some of these things I'm going to say might point to spoilers, so hopefully if you're listening to this, you've played the game already. If not, I don't think I'm going to say anything too crazy, so just maybe play the game. I don't know.
Blurt out largest spoiler and out of Wind Waker.
Yeah. So Jim, he's first met by this, character where he ends up getting a treasure map, right? But there are pirates after this character, and the pirates are pig pirates, which is quite a bit like moblins in the game. Right off the jump, they all come into town. They're like shady characters, kind of, trying to find them. And so one of the things that Jim has to do is go outside and side scooch along a wall to escape being noticed. I'm a little bit out of order because I was just going to do design stuff first, but there's a lot of game mechanics actually that you can see inspired by the movie as well, if you really get granular with it. So back
Jim
to
scooching.
Jim looks like Link. The pirates look like moblins a little bit. There's pig pirates. Somewhere along the line, after he goes on and starts on his adventure, he runs into a giant whale that looks a lot like Jaboon in this game. There's also a whale submarine that the pirates have that he runs into because it's Muppet Treasure Island. There's Silver and his group. Long John Silver comes from, if you didn't know that already, that's a character from the Treasure Island novel and all the adaptations. So once he's with the pirate crew, at some point he sneaks into their whale submarine, and it looks just like the barrel submarines in the game. Once he gets inside, like it has the same board pattern and like outer design.
Yeah, I see.
The actual Treasure Island in the movie looks an awful lot like Dragon Roost. It's like a huge spire with some details around it.
What?
Yeah. The pirate ship is like stupidly close, especially when they're up on the deck. It's like the exact same layout. Which I mean is just, generic pirate ship. So, I mean, to be fair, they probably didn't rip that. It was probably just coincidence, but still. Other than that, some other land formations, like the spires that in the Wind Waker, you'll sometimes see like rocks, like the bird ROC, right? They perch up on these like spired rocks. And that same land formation is present in the Wind Waker. Other than that, just some random stuff that I saw. The pirates all wear stripy shirts that look just like Miko's stripy shirt in this game. We'll run into Miko later. He's one of the pirates. The chandeliers are pretty much the same, and like all of the random like set pieces, like barrels and stuff like that. It's just you look at them and you're like, I can see this in the Wind Waker. Like it's 100% just such a similar art design. It's crazy. One other thing that I took note of is that Jim, his original boat is straight up like a barrel that floats through the water, just is like open on the top, and he's got a sail coming out of it. But in one of his original voyages, he has like dolphins following his ship, and then flying fish come out of the water and fly above him.
Animal Treasure Fantasy Island.
Yeah, it reminded me of the way the sharks attack in the Wind Waker. Once you finally get your boat and you're out on the sea, like sharks will straight up come up behind and jump up as if like likened to a dolphin at your boat. But it also got me thinking about how like one of the things that I'm sure was a bit of a challenge for maybe not the artists, but just like the developers of the game was how do we have an ocean exploration game that involves almost nothing under the water? And the way they do that is to have all of the action basically be from things that are jumping out of the water at you or like riding on the surface. Like everything is surface level. Like it just made me think like they had to overcome that challenge. And it seems like, all right, we can have things jumping out. We can have things flying overhead. We can have, I don't know.
I'm glad for one that they didn't put a lot under the water because that would have really tickled my thalassophobia. I tell you what now.
Yeah, it's like you're over an ocean, but it's like the ocean only needed to be like a foot deep for the game
pretty
to
much
work. Like that's.
I think the only thing that actually gave me like a little fright in the game way back then was the Kraken. That actually, like, the thought of being out on a boat and having giant tentacles reaching up into the sky around you and knowing that you're going to be in the stuff that you can't live in soon.
Yeah.
So
the other, one other design that I haven't mentioned yet is this character in the movie known as Kathy. Kathy is someone that Jim meets in prison. So there's like a story beat there that's kind of similar. But her design in the movie reminded me so much of a character named Mila in The Wind Waker, who is definitely a side character. This is like NPC status for sure. She's a character that I don't want to give too much of her story away because we're going to probably talk about it throughout the course of the podcast. But let's just say she's a character who falls on hard times And when she does, she looks a lot like this character in the movie. Strong female lead of this movie. She outsmarts the pirates a few times and has like a huge role to play. Kind of a mix between Mila and Tetra. And that's probably one of the more spoiler-y. Is that how you would say that as an adjective?
Yeah, pretty much.
Spoilery things.
Or spoilerish.
That I'm going to say. Yeah, spoilerish things. So story point similarities that I saw in the movie. One, getting locked in prison and escaping. There's like a little window he has to send his rat friend through to grab a key and come back in. He like sends him up with a rope. It's kind of funny. One thing, eavesdropping on pirates from above. There's like a couple scenes in the movie where you have to sneak where Jim has to like sneak in through windows or like up on near chandeliers or whatever and listen in on pirate meetings, which is 100% something that actually happens in the Wind Waker, which I thought was kind of cool.
My goodness.
Yeah, it plays out pretty similar in some ways. Needing money to buy a mast, one of the first things that Jim is faced with as a story beat is he's talking to his friend about how like, oh, if only they had money for a mast, they could like fix up their ship and get off the island.
Oh my goodness, number 2.
So there's like a whole thing of that in Wind Waker as well. There's, some scenes where Jim gets saved by Kathy. I talked about the outsmarting thing. And then somewhere in the middle of this movie as well, they try to, like, Kathy has the map that they're all trying to get to figure out where to go on the island, right? Like, they have part of what they need. I think they actually have the map, but she has like a key to the map that tells them where to go and what to look for. And so they're all like with the crew, right? And so they try to trick her by putting on a musical performance on the ship that involves like 3 instruments, but the main one in the center is a violin. And while they're all playing this, they try to like serve her a sleeping potion. And it all backfires. It's like one of the most ridiculous scenes in the whole movie. But just the fact that they like had a whole musical performance on the ship just made me think of how much music is implemented in this and how it's kind of not entirely similar, but just the celebratory nature of it. Like it kind of reminds me of the Kokiri doing their thing. Or the Koroks, I should say, doing their thing in this game. It's pretty cool. So then there's like the game mechanics that I saw while I was watching this. So we've gone over visual designs, story points, and now the mechanics. So I already mentioned sneaking across ledges, like doing the whole shuffle across the ledge thing. Jim routinely has a rope that he uses to like snag things and, collect things and climb things. So just reminds me of the grappling hook in Wind Waker. Very much so. Jim's little barrel ship that he has at the beginning straight up just has a retractable cannon on that thing. Which you definitely have in the Wind Waker.
Just a deluxe barrel.
Pop up out of the ship. I know, right? The barrel's got all kinds of stuff. Jim's best companion is straight up a rat in the movie that, he has like do certain little missions and stuff like that, but in the Wind Waker there is a mechanic where if you feed bait to there are rats in the game, and if you feed them bait, they will basically reward you, whether it's with rupees or other items. There's a scene in this movie where after Jim has successfully eavesdropped on the pirates, they have his treasure map, so he goes down and threatens them all with a bomb to get back his treasure map. And I thought that was really, really interesting, because not only did the bomb look similar, but they all freak out about it and like basically take his, like they respond basically exactly how he wanted them to. And in this game, there's a silly thing that happens if you try to use a bomb against a moblin, where they panic and they run away. Which is kind of funny because not every enemy will. Like there's a lot of enemies in this game that don't care about bombs. But the moblins, I remember specifically, if you throw a bomb at them, they kind of freak a little bit. So then hiding in barrels happens. I will say that I believe in the original Treasure Island, there's a hiding in a barrel scene, because in almost every adaptation I've ever seen of it, at some point Jim is hiding in a barrel. Like, it just happens in every single adaptation. So I think that's just a Treasure Island thing. I don't think that's specific to the movie. Two last ones, and then I'll be done. There's this in the finale scene of Animal Treasure Island, Jim is chasing Silver up this big rock ridge, and the whole way up, they're fighting, like they're sword fighting up the ridge. So I mean, not only is it, our little Link-like character fighting essentially a sword wielding pig, because Silver is a giant pig man. While they're having this fight, they keep chunking out sections of this rock ridge and like making what it ends up being like a platforming challenge for Jim to keep up with Silver. In The Wind Waker, there is specifically a rock spire island that reminds me way too much of this whole scenario, where essentially you just have a platforming puzzle that involves like bombs and chunking out parts of the ridge and climbing your way up. And then finally, towards the end, the pirate ship is in combat with another much larger warship that they end up exploding, like straight up going down to find like the munitions cargo and lighting the whole thing on fire. And as they get back out, they get into the pirate ship, and the pirate ship straight up jumps through the air from the shock of the explosion from the other ship. And the animation of the jumping ship reminded me a lot of the King of Red Lions, because you can just straight up make that ship jump whenever you want for no reason. So, yeah, it was a lot. And I know without having seen it, it's probably like, Ryan, you've been talking a long time, and I can't visualize any of what you're saying. So my recommendation is, if you're listening to this, maybe watch the movie. It's good. It's a good movie.
So what you're telling me is that the Wind Waker dev team in pre-production sat down in their comfy beanbag chairs in Nintendo Studios, and they were like, hello guys, we need inspiration for this game. We need some design elements and some functionality and some gameplay mechanics. And then there was one dude in the back who raised his hand who was like, sir, I have something that'll help. And then he proposed Animal Treasure Island. And initially they were all skeptical, like, I don't know. I mean, this was like a kid's thing, wasn't it? And he's like, just hold my beer and just watch it. And then they all watched it and were like, this is Wind Waker. And then just put all the stuff from the movie, or some elements of the movie, as some elements in the game. And we're like, yes.
I can't say that that's how that went down.
That's just how I saw it, as you're telling me. A lot of like just like story elements and gameplay elements like from the movie.
Well,
like,
it sounded like from the podcast episode that I listened to, right? The Legendary Adventures. It sounds like Aonuma, who was the director of this game, specifically was a fan of Animal Treasure Island. Like called it out as one of the movies that he really liked.
It was Aonuma.
So, being the guy at the helm of the movie, I could totally see him, what consciously or not, like he might have just had ideas about this game that he didn't even know he was getting from the movie. You know what I mean?
He woke up one day
buried within his subconscious.
Right. And he's just like, hey, what if the ship could jump? Or what if, we have a grappling hook be one of the items? Just random stuff like that from his love of the movie, But I don't know. I don't know how the translation happened, but it is like the most verifiable inspiration for the game.
Yeah.
It seems like, and it just you can feel it when you watch the movie. You can look at it and be like, wow, I played a video game like this at one point. So I don't know. I enjoyed watching it very much because it just reminded me of the game so much. But like the story's a lot different, obviously. The overarching plot of Animal Treasure Island is much more like regular Treasure Island, but you can just see a lot of that seafaring piratey adventure, just taking a lot of those elements and remixing them into a Zelda game. It's kind of it's very interesting to me that like from the original Legend of Zelda up into Majora's Mask, you had a lot of like Link is kind of a knight slash Peter Pan-esque. Like the clothing is kind of strange, but other than that, he's very much set in castle settings. Like it's very much fantasy sword and board. Like it's not really pirate based at all. Like there are pirates in Majora's Mask, but they're not even like these pirates.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no treasure hunt from it. Like there's nothing, like none of that element is really there. And it just feels like this movie took a hard turn into like ocean faring and sea exploration, and it's like almost like an entirely different era as well as being a different art style. And I mean, as much as I really like that, I also understand why that kind of made a lot of people kind of freak out about this game a little bit at first. That and the cell shading,
Oh, I like the cell shading.
Well, people were wanting that Space World game, but instead they got, Toon Link, and they kind of, at the time, we had all just gotten 3D gaming in the past decade, and everybody was kind of obsessed with making it look more and more realistic at the time. And not to say that we've ever grown out of that. They're still,
they're still chasing that.
Still chasing that dream 20 years later.
Graphics over gameplay and performance.
But back then, I mean, we had just gotten 3D, so every advancement felt monumental. So when people saw, oh, the GameCube can make Link look like this, that's amazing. And then instead they got Toon Link, they were like, wait a minute, like that's not that's not what we wanted.
I would arguably, and this is 20 years later, me saying this, I would arguably say of the era of 2000s games who did cell shading, who effectively did cell shading really nicely. So like Nintendo, Level 5, Persona, they achieved a level of graphics that those games still look good today. Whereas you take like something like Metal Gear Solid and you try to play like Metal Gear Solid 2 from the same time as Wind Waker or Metal Gear Solid 3, and no, they got like octagon arm noodles. Like it's just not playable. So like for me, and maybe it was an issue then, but like now, those graphics still hold up. Like Dark Cloud 2, those graphics, I mean, archaic as the menus are, I'm sure Cameron can attest to me, the graphics itself like still hold up.
Oh yeah.
And that's why I like those cell shading games. And so anyone from 2004, you can suck it. Or 3? Was it 3? It was one of those years. Or wait, when did Wind Waker come out?
It was like 2000.
It was one of those years.
Maybe 2003. I mean, hold on.
3.
We don't have Google at our fingertips.
Initial release date was 2002, actually, it says.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I said at first. I feel good about that. But yeah, it's kind of like the Toy Story effect. So the original Toy Story was like 1995, but again, it was like right at the start of CG, like, computer animation. And instead of going for something super realistic, all the toys are like they all have rounded features and they have cartoony textures that kind of make them more evergreen. And I think that Wind Waker kind of did the same thing by making Link's face, for example, like making the expressions in his eyes and his face like more of a toon style. They're basically vector images. Like it looks good years later because instead of going for super high detail, they just they made it simple.
It was silly
to do, and it was it definitely made it last longer than trying to be as realistic as they could manage back then.
Twilight Princess.
Yeah, well, Twilight Princess has its own issues, but
No, it's perfect.
I actually feel like that Space World game that they did initially release was supposed to be early drafting of Twilight Princess, and then they just like routed it back for a few.
So
years.
that's actually one of the things that they mentioned in the podcast was the Space World thing. I guess it was never actually meant to be a like the next Zelda, because it was basically a scene from Ocarina of Time. But when they made the GameCube, and they realized like how much actual power they had in that system versus the N64, they were running experiments with it, and one of those experiments was that animation. But they showed it off to try to say like, hey, check out what this system can do, not this is what the next Zelda is going to be. So they didn't really start development on Wind Waker until after that whole showcase, it seems like. But that's what they kind of had in the chamber just from them tooling around with the hardware. So I don't know. It's just, there's a lot of confusion and a lot of like most people at the time thought that was the case. They thought that was going to be the next Zelda. And meanwhile, Nintendo was like, no, that's just us trying to show off the GameCube. It was like,
see a Rick Roll ad.
You can't just do that. I think they learned their lesson though, because they have not done a tech demo like that since, where they show off like images from something that's not actually a game.
Smart.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was cool. I definitely there were some other points from the podcast that I thought were really cool. Just talking about some of the artists and kind of how Toon Link and the Moblins were kind of the first things that were designed, and everything was kind of based off of their look. Like, how would the world look if this is what Link and his enemies look like? Kind of talking about some of the initial responses people had to the games and things like that, and how one of the cool things that he talked about was the sound design. This game has, aside from the visual art style, I want to say that the music in this game is pretty well noted amongst most fans of the series as being like, if not the best, then one of the best soundtracks. And part of that, it kind of owes to previous games that it samples from and like takes inspiration from, but part of that is just some of the new tracks as well that are completely original to this game, but just capture like a really just strong emotional landscape for the game. It's just good. Like, the music's really good. I mean, it's like the last time, I think they didn't have full orchestration until Skyward Sword. So I think that this was one of their last like fully synth type. Like they did a lot of MIDI work. They did a lot of sampling to make the soundtrack for this, but it's all gorgeous music. Like I think through this season coming up, one of the things I really want to focus on is the sound design. And one of the cool things that they pointed out that I feel like I knew about but didn't ever quite realize was what they call Mickey Mousing. So whenever Link hits something in this game, like whenever he actually lands a strike, there's like a note that plays with the attack that like matches the combat music that's going on in the background.
What?
Yeah. so so I don't know if it perfectly matches the music, but it's within the same key, and actually like there's a sequence to it, and it when you're playing and you're battling, you'll notice it. It goes like blink, 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 like whenever you're doing a combo. But yeah, they have just like the part of the sound design is that your attacks sound more like the music than they do like actual attacks would. So the sound effects kind of get added into the overall sound of the game, which is really cool.
Rhythm game confirmed.
Basically.
I mean, I still have on my phone to this day, I have a dubstep remix of Dragon Roost Island. So, the music's good. It's great. I can think of a couple songs, even though I haven't touched this game in a decade. I can think of like 2 or 3 songs from it just off the top of my head because it's good music. It's just free, real music.
Yeah. Yeah.
The overture or the overland ocean theme will literally play in your head for hours after you're done playing the game.
Yeah. The overworld is incredible. You did Dragon Roost. I mean, just thinking about how in Tears of the Kingdom, the Colgera fight, like it sounds so epic that you forget that it originated with Dragon Roost Island. Like that was like that's where that song came from.
Even
that's why it's so good.
Rito Village music. So the Rito Village music has the like in midway through Dragon Roost Island, it has the high notes that I don't want to do them right now, but yeah. So they got inspiration for both Rito Village at night and day, and the Colgera fight, and it's just the song never dies. They just keep reinventing it
because
it's so good.
Yeah.
The other one, and we're gonna talk about it like right when we start the game, but even just Outset Island, like when I hear that, I get nostalgic. Like I think even just playing the game in the first place, like the second time I ever booted up the game and got back to the island, I was like my feels, like my heart, like you hear the music and you're like, I remember this. This is the home music. Like my character is home right now. This is amazing. And I think even during the course of one playthrough, pretty early on in the game, obviously you leave Outset Island, you make your outset, right? And you don't come back for a long time. Like you have a few chapters of game before you ever find your way back to Outset Island.
Bye, Grandma.
But when you do come back, that island music plays again, and it's already like you feel like you missed this place. Like it's that powerful, the emotions of the music. So just an amazing soundtrack. That's kind of why I want to focus on it, because I feel like they really, like, one of the, aside from establishing the tune art style, like so many of the songs from this have just lived way past the game itself in a way that I think needs to be appreciated. So
rent free in my head.
Yeah. One last topic before we get to our rank and recap was the crunch of the game. Like the idea.
Excuse me?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of talk about the Wind Waker not being a complete game. Like saying that it ran into scheduling issues and they had to cut a lot of content because of time. This seems to be the opinion of Miyamoto, or was the opinion of Miyamoto. Like in an interview, he said something along the lines of like, we didn't have time to implement these last couple dungeons, so it didn't happen. But in similar interviews with Aonuma, he does mention like, yeah, like we did keep a couple of dungeons out, but it wasn't really about the time more than it was that our game was getting too big. Like we got to a point where we were like, we want this game to be approachable. We want like newcomers and kids to be able to actually beat the game. So we don't want to make it an adventure that's just too huge. and I guess for the sake of approachability, they kind of cut stuff down. But a lot of those ideas from those other dungeons were already like implemented into future projects before this game was even finished. So he basically said like, yeah, like there was more, but it was too much. So they kept what they needed to have a full story and still have an approachable game. So
I could see that because Wind Waker is long.
it is long.
So Miyamoto out here, like trying to make the first Breath of the Wild, and Aonuma is like, "Yo, like this is 2002. Slow it down."
We ain't there yet. We're 2 decades out, G.
Yeah. So, something else just to bring it kind of to a close here is that the Triforce quest, I guess, obviously, like that's one of the biggest points of contention with this game is that right towards like the 3/4 mark. This is a spoiler. There's a quest that involves a whole lot of treasure hunting.
I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. Hate it. Hate it. Everyone else did too. That's why the HD got rid of it.
Well, here's
limited
the thing. Yeah, they brought it way down. So I guess in the Japanese version of the game, the original release, it was like the worst case scenario. It was like every time you had to find one of the important treasures that I won't name at this point, you had to go through like a series or a chain of say 3 other sea charts before you got it. So it was just like chart after chart after chart, just multiple times over, and it was horrible. And then I guess in the American version, they switched it out to you have to find one special chart, you have to get it deciphered, and then you have to go get the treasure. And then in the HD version, they brought it down even more to like now there are less of these charts that you need, and also the whole process of deciphering and stuff is just a lot easier than it ever was. So they just kept cutting away at it until it is what it is. I will say that for this playthrough, I plan to play the HD version on the Wii U. I do feel like it's just the quality of life improvements make it a lot better once you get to that point in the game, and nothing else is really that different except it looks prettier. So, yeah, that's my plan. I don't know if anyone's trying to go OG with it, but
nah, bro. I'm playing that HD remake on Simu on my handheld.
okay.
I'm gonna be doing that HD remake too up on that Wii U.
Nice.
And not just any Wii U, it's gonna be the Wind Waker Wii U.
Oh, perfect.
Because I got that Wind Waker decked out Wii U.
Nice.
It came with Wind Waker, and it has like the Triforce and like all these like gold acrylic like designs throughout the Wii U. It's pretty sick looking.
Gotcha.
So let me hit you with this. So you said the biggest point of contention was what we just went over. For me, I think the biggest point of contention with the game and everyone at the time who was talking about it was that multiplayer. Can we talk about that multiplayer? Because that was a point of contention. So
Are you talking about the Tingle Tuner?
You had the GameCube controller, and you had to plug in the GBA link cable to the GameCube.
Oh my!
And then it enabled the second player to then become Tingle, a little tiny nothingness that you're just sort of like Tingle flying above Link, I guess, but you never saw the second player, and you can just like tap the Game Boy Advance like buttons to like drop bombs on enemies and like get money out of them, and like there was I guess some other features in like dungeons you could do, but it was the most useless
10 out of 10 co-op experience, Mike. Is what you're describing here, Amir.
It was terrible. I remember
like,
it.
Entire
I remember it.
Like history of doing multiplayer. It was the worst adaptation for multiplayer I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was bad. I mean, and the Tingle Tuner, I had that cable. I had that
Yeah.
I still have the Game Boy Advance that I use sitting on my shelf, even though it's dead and doesn't work anymore. It's just a showpiece now. But I had the link cable, and I definitely tooled around with the tuner. But it lost magic for me almost immediately because I took the thing into the Forest Haven, right? Like not the Haven, but the actual like Forbidden Forest or whatever it's called. Like the one, like the probably I think it's the second dungeon of the game. And so it's definitely post Windfall. I had the tuner, and going in, there was a puzzle that very much could have been solved with a bomb, but that's not what the game wanted you to do. So I put the Tingle tuner over the section to just try to blow it up. I hit the A button, and Tingle was like, "Nah, I can't do that here." And I was like, "Excuse me." I just like moved him to somewhere else in the room and dropped a bomb just fine. And I was like, Tingle, why are you here if you're not going to help? And then at that point, I just stopped using it. I was like, yeah, this isn't anything.
Crazy.
Like, I'd rather just throw the bombs as Link. Like, why are we doing this?
It was fun for all of like 15 seconds, So like for that 15 seconds, it's like, oh, okay. And then after, it's just like, no. It's a pretty good experience,
Cool idea. Did not work as intended.
No.
That was a 0.4 out of 10 on IGN.
But yeah, I mean, this was a game
Much wet.
I remember. I mean, it's 2002. I mean, we were what, middle schoolers back then?
Oh gosh.
I was 10 years old. I mean, it was one of the first games I actually owned because I got the GameCube, Ocarina of Time, and Wind Waker all at once one Christmas.
That was a Christmas.
That was a Christmas. Well, I mean, if you pre-ordered Wind Waker, you just got Ocarina of Time with it. I think the one I got though actually came with the GameCube. It was like you buy the GameCube and it just has this packaged in.
Was it the one with Master Quest?
Yeah.
Yeah, the collector's edition.
Yeah, it's pretty sick. I still play that to this day, man. It's so good. That was the upscaled one too. Anyway, so this game is like near and dear to my heart when it comes to Zelda games. I mean, for a while, I want to say, it was probably my favorite game. Especially, playing through it. I remember writing out, like actually drawing out a C chart of my own of like the whole map. Just like I made a grid and sketched out the islands and like marked them down so that if I ever replayed the game, I would just have a full map and wouldn't have to feed any fish about it. Stuff like that. Like I was very much into this game. I remember talking to just friends in school about it, but I think I was a little bit late to the game. Because it came out like almost a full year before I would have had it. So definitely wasn't like the earliest adopter of the game. But as far as like me having the GameCube, which was like the first system that I actually considered my own, this came along with it. So it was one of those first games, one of those first like, it's like a core gaming memory for me, I guess is what I'm saying. So very excited to be talking about it. Kind of goes right along there with Ocarina of Time. So I'm hoping that we can find some really cool story beats that I'd never noticed before. But we'll see. We'll see when we get into it, what kind of patterns we can catch.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going to catch Peter Pan.
You're going to be Peter Pan, my guy. That's
What?
You're the guy in the green
Shmee! He's threatening me, Shmee! Get the cannon!
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing as Link, you gotta at some point look at the outfit you're wearing and say, maybe I am the Pan.
Well, where's my Tinkerbell then? Where Navi at? Where's someone to just be there to tell me, hey, listen, all the time?
That's your boat.
I mean, Red Lions though, like that ain't no Tinkerbell, man. Come on.
Yeah. Like you just
You ever been here before?
boat drives me nuts. We're gonna have conversations about this boat. But yeah, cool. So guys, we've played at least 5 Legend of Zelda titles now, probably 6. We've played at least 6 of these things, and we haven't ranked them since we only played 3. So I think it's about time that we talk about where our current standings are with these games.
Well, I got my list ready.
Do you now?
Yeah. If you want me to go into it while y'all think of
you gonna start from the bottom and work your way to the top, or?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's start at the bottom barrel. Get these little bottom barrel trash out of here. Just kidding. Any Zelda game.
Let's get the trash out of here.
So far, at least. All the Zelda games we've played so far are good. So even the bottom one is still good. Get that point across.
Kidding.
We haven't played Zelda 2 yet, so we're
and
we don't plan to.
I probably wouldn't finish it. Warning.
Yeah.
Don't be giving people false hope.
All right. So, the bottom of the barrel for me personally is the game we just finished, the Minish Cap. So, personally, the game was great. I liked the story for sure. The story was definitely gripping for me. The combat was fun. I mean, how can you forget about the Cane of Pachi? I'm never gonna forget about Bob Pachi ever again. The Cane of Pachi was great. The Rock's Cape was probably one of my favorite items, and I can see why they've never done Rock's Cape again, because that would just make Link. I mean, I guess with like TOTK, you have the Zonai vehicles. You don't really need the cape, but I can see why they never did the cape again, because it's just OP. Yeah, so overall, like the combat and everything was great. Something missed. And I can't explain what it was, but the whole time I was kind of just like, I didn't do any of the side quests. I didn't do any of the extra stuff. I mean, I didn't care about the mysterious shells. The game didn't really entice me to.
But what about the kinstones?
It didn't feel enticing to me. Like, I like to be gripped by side quests, and I'll do them all day. And I just didn't feel gripped by anything other than the main story in this game, which I just kind of like beelined. Not to say that like maybe I was busy, I don't know, but I also don't see myself ever really returning to Minish Cap. So at that point, definitely bottom for me.
Okay.
Do we want to like go?
We can go around. Yeah, that's fine.
You want to go around, or I just keep going?
No, it's all good. You want to do all of our 6s first? I'm cool with that. I can go next. I'm gonna be real. I'm still salty about Tears of the Kingdom. Not because it's a bad game. It's not. It's a good game. It's a fun game. Especially if you don't buy in to all the chaff. Because there's more of that game than there needs to be. And I feel like that was intentional. Like they gave you like, here's all the game. It's basically like all you can eat game, right? Like as much as you want to play it, it's there for you. And I understand that, but I forced myself to eat way too much. And so I had a bad experience. And it wasn't like I don't know. It's not that I can blame the actual design of the game or the mechanics. Honestly, after grinding all of the light roots and all of the shrines and all of that, and then getting very little story in return, and like repeating story, like broken record type story.
Secret Stone.
And honestly, like minimal continuity from Breath of the Wild when I was hoping for incredible continuity. I know my expectations were way too high, but they were shattered pretty immensely. And I felt betrayed. So Tears of the Kingdom is at the bottom of my list, mostly out of principle, to be honest. I'm just like, I feel like they honestly dropped the ball with a lot of the meaningfulness of the game. And instead just said, hey, here's a big game for people with big appetites. And it just wasn't what it needed to be.
All right, now my number 6. This is kind of a close call, honestly, because I am with Fonz on the Tears of the Kingdom thing. Although honestly, I feel like maybe the performance and the fact that going into Ultra Hand every time dropped the frames from 30 FPS probably annoyed me more than anything else about the game, and just because we happened to just finish playing Breath of the Wild for the podcast, so we just played basically the exact prequel to the game where everything looks the same models, and so we just played this game with a few less features and quality of life updates. So, but honestly, I think I'm going to put Minish Cap at the bottom of my list as well with Anthony. Because even though I did play this game way back when it released, I don't know, exactly after release, but on the Game Boy Advance on original hardware as a kid, I didn't really feel any nostalgia when I played this game. Like, I wouldn't say that I didn't enjoy playing the game, but I thought I would have enjoyed it more, which tells me that I think I didn't even enjoy it as much as I thought I did when I played it as a kid, or else it would have struck more with me. It's a fun experience and it has cool mechanics, but I also agree with Anthony that the side content just isn't that inviting. It's not that rewarding. It's like, yeah, you can get a cool item here and there, but the majority of what you're getting is kinstones and a bunch of shells and stuff, and that really doesn't incentivize you to want to put a whole bunch of extra time into doing the same kinds of things to get the same usually boring rewards. And the story was, it was a story, but it was a little empty at its core. And I think that's probably why it didn't really stick with me as much as a lot of earlier game, like, because I'm going to put, a later one, A Link to the Past, a lot higher on this list, which technically had even less features and worse graphics and all this, but I just enjoyed the experience in the game and the story of it more than what I did with Minish Cap. So that's going to go at number 6 for me.
Gotcha. Man, what's your 5?
Well, my 5 is TOTK. So similar to you guys, I also was on the, we were all on the Breath of the Wild train where we played the crap out of Breath of the Wild. When it came time to Tears of the Kingdom, we were hit with the awesome new factor of, the opening island, the amber colored leaves and being on an island. I mean, it felt like a new Elden Ring just dropped. Like, that's how much hype I felt for this. And then we got, that, like, all that opening stuff, all of meeting Rauru, like, happened, and we get down to Hyrule, and everything, just basically what Fonz just said, everything they set up from Breath of the Wild, literally, I mean, maybe there's like 5% of stuff they built upon. 90% of the world they just trashed and started over or did something else and didn't tie loose ends. And it was so annoying and frustrating because I like lore, and they just trashed all the lore and made me real sad. And because of that, I don't care how fun it is to build his own vehicle, it's at the bottom, right above Minish Cap for me.
So, so I'm marking these down as we go too. I feel like my list might change in the future after I'm done being upset with Tears. But my number 5 is, I mean, you guys might have guessed it, the Minish Cap. I enjoyed the game, and honestly, like, I thought I was going to enjoy it more coming off of Tears of the Kingdom to finally get back to a linear game that at least introduced itself as being very story driven. Except, once you got past the first dungeon or so, it very much just became, hey, go get the thing. It kind of broke down. It kind of, fell off the wheels a little bit. I will say that even with that, it wasn't trying to be a hard sequel to anything. If anything, it was a prequel, I believe, and I never played the game that it was a prequel to. So there's a lot there that I know that I'm missing some context, but at the same time, I didn't find it offensive. I didn't find it to be disappointing. For a Game Boy Advance game, I thought it was pretty good in terms of giving you, some kind of rewards, even if they weren't always the best, for exploring and trying to figure things out. Even if it was just seeing some NPCs get something that they were looking forward to, like building a house for the goddesses or whatever, right? Just random touches like that were really nice. I mean, the visuals were great. It does a lot of callbacks to Wind Waker, which I just got done talking about, was a big part of my childhood. So there's some nostalgia factor there too built in. Even though I never played this particular game until, a couple of years ago. And with all of that, I mean, I think that it sits solidly at my 5. It's not, I wouldn't call it better than any of the other games that we played. I wouldn't even call the mechanics better than, Tears of the Kingdom, but they were very good for what they were. They were very, in a 2D setting, some of the things that they were doing on a top-down game were unlike any other thing that I've seen in a top-down game. So the items were great. The story was passable, not offensive. Generally just a straight over the plate. If I was a not Nintendo developer making a Nintendo game, franchise entry, this is kind of what I would expect out of it. So I thought it was good. Put it at my 5. Cam, how about you?
Well, I mean, it shouldn't really be too much of a surprise that with the way I introduced my 6, said it was a very close one between two particular games. So I guess we might as well jump right into Tears of the Kingdom being my number 5. I mean, gameplay-wise and quality of life, it is probably better than Breath of the Wild, but I think we touched on this in the last one, but Breath of the Wild launching with the new system that was the Switch that sold so many copies, and it was a big game for people that hadn't played a recent Zelda game, and it just something, it almost brings back memories of when we were in school playing the same Zelda game, talking about it, getting hyped for it. That was Breath of the Wild. Tears of the Kingdom, like Anthony said, kind of felt that way right in the beginning when you're seeing all these new islands and stuff, but then pretty quickly you hop down to Hyrule and you're like, oh yeah, it's Hyrule again. Sweet. But Breath of the Wild was fresh the entire way through, and I don't know, that first experience of playing Breath of the Wild it is something that I still remember. And I had a new TV that the colors were really popping on, so I mean that also helped. There was just some stuff that lined up.
Yeah.
Which is why Tears of the Kingdom coming out right after we got done playing Breath of the Wild and it having the frame issues that I already kind of talked about is why I would put it under Breath of the Wild, which is potentially going to be my next one.
Gotcha. All right.
So, this might be where we stray. So, I'm excited to see what you guys' next ones are. My next game is probably shocking to you two, but it is Skyward Sword. And I think when we did the original one with 3, I think Skyward Sword was up there, above A Link to the Past. So she moved it down to A Link to the Past. After playing Minish Cap, I have a new appreciation for A Link to the Past and what it did and the story, and I'll get into that. But Skyward Sword was a great game. Don't get me wrong, still up there and one of my favorite Zelda games of all time. Trying to incorporate the Wii remote in the gameplay was pretty choice. The world itself felt open, felt like you could do a lot of things. But at the same point, there wasn't really much in the world. And the story outside of like Groose and Girahim pretty much wasn't existent. Like outside of Groose and Girahim pretty much saving the story, there wasn't really a story. I mean, you were in Hyrule, you were trying to find Zelda. I mean, it was your main goal, but like there wasn't much development about Hyrule past that. I mean, sure, you meet like a few people here and there, but like, yeah. So for me, it's the fourth option.
Okay. Let me tell you, we're gonna stray so much. Because my number 4 is Skyward Sword. Yeah, the thing about Skyward Sword, replaying it for the podcast was eye-opening. Like, I did realize how much I actually did like the game. Like, I think while we were doing that season, I mentioned how it used to be towards the bottom of my like entire list of Zelda titles, and that it wasn't anymore. Part of that was just the loneliness of playing it in college when I didn't have anyone else playing with me to talk to about it. And then like being able to actually, not only have people to talk to about it, but discovering new like backgrounds and inspirations for the game, and just seeing the way that game actually had a consistent lore, had some really good storytelling in it, had a whole character arc for Groose. Like, it did a lot of really cool things that I actually felt and really appreciate about it. I still think that some of the backtracking is tedious. I still think that a lot of the travel in general is clunky. Especially if you're using Wii controls, it's just like not a terribly enjoyable experience to go back to. So the story honestly kind of saves it a bit because the mechanics just weren't what they needed to be. So I like the game. Number 4, I don't think is a bad position. Like especially if it holds at 4 while we start adding games to this list. I don't know that it will, but I have a new appreciation for it, but unfortunately it only gets it up to 4th place from that.
Cool. You guys definitely didn't peer pressure me or anything. But after talking up Breath of the Wild a little bit there a minute ago, I think that the experience of that coming out with a new console and having people around to talk to about it in a way that I feel like I haven't had in a Zelda game prior to that in quite a while, I feel like I want to put that higher than Skyward Sword, because I never played Skyward Sword back on the Wii, and if I did, I was over at Anthony's house and played it for maybe 30 minutes to an hour or less. Like, I never played it because I never had a Wii or a Wii U. So yeah, it's not that the game was bad in any way. I enjoyed especially the combat with the Joy-Cons was a lot of fun to mess around with, and actually being able to swing a sword was something that I don't think I'd done at all in a Zelda game up until that point, which was again on the Switch that I played it for the first time. But the games that are higher up on this list just, I think, meant more to me, or were at a more impactful point in my gaming life than Skyward Sword. So good experience, fun game, but the other games I just think are better on the list.
Gotcha.
I feel that.
All right.
So, moving along to the better games on this list. Not
Whoa.
that bottom trash.
Whoa.
Just kidding. So, these next two, I'm going to say are a toss-up. I'm going to do them in an order. But for me, I think it's a toss-up between the two. So, I'm just going to say Link to the Past first.
Okay.
Phenomenal. I mean, for the year it came out, it was like early 90s, I think. I mean, this game was just phenomenal. It pretty much set the precedent of what the Legend of Zelda series is today. I mean, it's responsible for most of what's in Zelda today, like what's still reoccurring, what things, like what enemies. I mean, the first Zelda did a little bit of that. The second Zelda strayed so far, I don't even know where they went. And then this kind of brought it back home to what Zelda feels like. And I feel like if I didn't even play this game the first time I ever played this game was obviously when we did it for the podcast. And I feel like if I did play this game back when it came out, or even in the early 2000s, I would have had nostalgia for it playing on the podcast. I played it just like, what was it, like a year ago now? Like, no, it was longer than that. It was like 2 years ago now. And I already have nostalgia for it. Like, that's how much of an impact like this game left. Like, I could go back and play it and just have as much fun. And then getting to the dark world and transitioning. And I think what this game did right that the Minish Cap didn't do was everything felt right. So like going everywhere, finding little hidden nooks and crannies in this game felt right for some reason versus Minish Cap it didn't. And so I don't know, this game was choice.
Yeah. I hear that.
Was.
Yeah. My number 3 is Breath of the Wild. I feel like with Breath of the Wild, they kind of, I'm trying to think of a good way to express this. It seemed like they fully realized exactly what they were setting out to do. Between just the landscapes that were, ripe for exploration, even, the fact that they had like thought out areas where there would be like mini bosses just across the land, different microcosm communities that you could go into, and places to help rebuild, places to explore. Just it was a lot of good in the in between, and then each area that had its own story. The stories actually felt as meaningful as they could for what they were. Like, it wasn't, I wouldn't put it in the same rank as some other games, obviously. Like, I'm putting it at number 3 here. But at the same time, like, it didn't have the same problems of Tears of the Kingdom. Some places it left open ends that felt like you could kind of fill in your own lore at the time, at least. I want to say that Tears of the Kingdom kind of squashed some of that, but before that happened, there was a lot of theorizing and digging and just really cool details in the world building of the game that made it a really enjoyable experience, both as someone who likes when the story is just given and likes to try to find it in the details themselves, like without the game outright telling you. I think that I'm trying to figure out how to describe it. I think one of the cool things about it was going through and doing our movie night with that one actually kind of fixed my perspective on what the memories were actually trying to say. Because I know that playing through the game the first time on my own, just watching them completely out of order, it felt like nonsense. It's like, why are we collecting these memories? Like, each one is just like, they're not in order. They're just showing me random bits. Like, clearly something emotional happened. Like, everything went, into chaos. But the whole story felt like chaos because it wasn't in order. And then going back and sitting down together and just watching all of them like in sequence, it made me realize like the character development that was happening throughout that story. And it honestly added some depth to the game that I didn't even know was there to begin with. So I think it deserves a high rank, and I think that 3 is a pretty good spot for it here on my list. So yeah.
Fonz, my man, I think me and you's list's gonna be looking similar aside from that 5 and 6, if you know what I'm saying. And I rhymed with it, so you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
because I'm sitting on Breath of the Wild as well. Again, it was a phenomenal experience. The timing it came out at, right when the Switch launched. The new TV that I had, 40-inch, better contrast and sharpness and colors than I've had on any television, which made the game really pop with the more saturated color style that they took with the game instead of something maybe a little more like that one that we haven't played yet with the wolf and the Twilight Princess, where everything was a little darker and more muted. This game definitely felt a little more like Wind Waker, the game we're going to go into, where the colors really popped out at you. And just on what I was playing it on, that felt great. I was talking to you. I was talking to Anthony. I was talking to my friend Casey. I was maybe talking. I think even Matt had it before he turned around and sold his Switch and everything because he's like, this system. But fair enough, not for everyone. And I really don't have anything against Breath of the Wild. It was such a fresh mix-up for what Zelda has ever been. And I think they really did a very good job with what they tried to set out to do. I think the exploration with the glider was phenomenal, and just everything that they put in the game, the way they turned Hyrule from what used to be a screen sliding to another screen sliding into a single field where you have all the main parts around it, to what actually felt like a region that you could explore, and you could go from one side to the other, and maybe if you squinted you could see that spot you were standing on that mountain over there, but it was a little ways away. That is a good sized map you got to explore. But yeah, the other games that are in the first and second spots just meant a little bit more to me, and I played them earlier on, and they were a bigger impact on the games that I enjoyed and how I played games from that point forward. So I think that they still deserve a spot that's higher than number 3.
Yeah. Cool. Mayo, what's your number 2, though?
Well, this comes at no surprise that it is Breath of the Wild. I mean, you guys pretty much said it. The game, Nintendo got their juice back, basically. I mean, they've been making games that have had the same formula. Skyward Sword is just newer. Twilight Princess, which is just newer Majora's Mask. They all have their own quirks. But it's Wind Waker really tossed it out of left field and nailed it. And so I feel like this was Nintendo kind of going back out and just you know what, let's just do Nintendo Skyrim. And they did it. And I just played so many hours of this game. It's so expansive. I don't think I did everything. In fact, I know I didn't do everything. There's so much I haven't done in that game. And I think they nailed almost every single design choice or just everything they did to it being perfect, outside of 2 things that really bothered me, which is just keeping it from being at the top slot. And those 2 things are, it was so big that it felt empty. There were definitely pockets of the world that I'm like, why am I here? Why am I on this cliff? There's nothing here.
Because it's beautiful. Just kidding. Keep going.
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful, but it's there's nothing here. I
the
need
bananas.
So there was that, and the Divine Beasts just still does not sit right with me, and they didn't fix that in TOTK. I mean, they did a little bit of fixing. They tried a little bit harder, but the Divine Beast switch, I know it was new. I know it was something they wanted to try, and I think the Divine Beast for the story worked really well, but as actual dungeons, mainline dungeons, I was not a fan, and I know a lot of the internet agrees with me. I know you guys agree with me. So that's just what's keeping it out of that top slot for me. And like I said, I mean, Link to the Past and Breath of the Wild, they're pretty much interchangeable with 2 or 3. The only reason I put Breath of the Wild at 2 is just, I guess, architecture. It's a bigger game. It came out later. So yeah.
Gotcha.
Also, since we're just about to be done talking about Breath of the Wild, I want to say the first time I saw that green dragon up in the sky, that was like a holy kind of moment.
Oh, man.
Ain't never expect to be looking up in no sky over no lake and see giant crystal dragon. And I'm like, is that going to eat me?
Nah,
That was crazy. I mean, nah.
want to fly about, you know.
Yeah, but I didn't know that at the time. I hadn't looked nothing up about the game. I didn't know what that dragon was doing, and I didn't know if his eyes were gonna glow red and be like, "Oh, I'm gonna get you now."
I see you, I'm getting you. That's it. I'm gonna
It
eat
triggered a little bit of my megalophobia, you know,
Mm.
stuff that's real big.
Yeah. No, I got you.
Yeah. All right, sorry.
No, it's all good. My number 2 is A Link to the Past. It is, as far as I'm concerned, the best 2D Zelda I think that exists.
Agreed.
I don't even know, like, I grew up as a 3D Zelda guy. Like, my first Zelda was Ocarina of Time, right? So, and obviously I just talked about how I had Wind Waker come along with it, and from then on I was just a 3D console guy. I never even like thought to touch a 2D Zelda. And since then I've tried a bunch of them, and I gotta say that A Link to the Past takes the cake. It feels like Zelda. Like that, like honestly, after playing The Legend of Zelda and A Link to the Past, I'm like, yeah, A Link to the Past is way better. Like it's just it just feels like a full story. It feels like such a cool adventure. Like you have 2 full maps to kind of contend with. And one of them is much more cheery and fun, and the other one is like straight up Doom status. And it's really good. It does a really good job of balancing like the whimsy and the story and the fantasy aspects with like really good mechanics and gameplay and danger and stuff. Like it's a lot of fun. And honestly, like even if they, you know, some of the items and tools you get in that are wacky, but some of them like just like the cane of burnout, like you don't even need it, but if you found it, you basically just had a hack to get through the game. Like it's just stuff like that. I don't know. It's just it's got that gaming magic, man. It's got the juice. So
It does.
that's my number 2. Only because the number 1 is like you're not gonna take it out of its spot with that. But as far as 2D Zeldas go, I think it's the pinnacle, and I think to me, it's like it's one of the most quintessential Zelda games. It's so good.
Yeah.
And as I had hypothesized, my list and Fonz's is continuing to look in a similar manner.
For my number 2 slot is also A Link to the Past. And in order to really talk about the effect this game had, I feel like I want to talk about another one I played right before it, which was Oracle of Ages. What's it? Oracle of Ages was, I think, the first Zelda game that I ever played, because I didn't have an NES or an SNES or an N64, so I didn't play any of Zelda 1, Zelda 2. My first introduction to Zelda was purely handheld, which means it might actually have been Link's Awakening, but that's going back. I'm not really sure. Point being, though, Oracle of Ages, I kind of left on a sour note with this game because I got to a point that I thought was, and might still be, because I've seen debate online. Some people say there is, some people say there isn't. But I thought I soft-locked myself in Jabu Jabu's belly, which was the 8th and final, like, official dungeon before you get to the last one with the final boss in Oracle of Ages. And I used a small key on the wrong door. And I could never find a way to progress past that. And, you know, even back to a couple of years ago, I was looking up, like, I wonder if there really was a soft lock there, or if I was just still, you know, a young kid whose brain hadn't fully developed, so I didn't realize what I had to do. And so, like I said, I've seen argument online. Some people do say that there is an actual soft lock in Jabu Jabu as well. And then some people say, oh, no, if you go back and go around here through, and I didn't want to play the game again, so I don't know if what they're saying is actually true. But it left a bad taste in my mouth as a kid that didn't get to finish this game. But A Link to the Past came along when, you know, if it wasn't as good of a game as it was, maybe I wouldn't have gotten pulled back into Zelda at all because I really wasn't feeling it after Oracle of Ages. But A Link to the Past just nailed it. It was because now I know what the original Zelda was. Before I'd only had Link's Awakening and Oracle of Ages to go off of, but it just felt like the right direction for the game. Everything about it just felt, I don't know, like it should be there. Like from starting your adventure and having the stuff happen to get your sword and finding out that you're the hero and you have to go and stop what's happening in Hyrule, all the way to jumping in water and being able to swim when you had no idea that was a thing, and I don't think that was a thing in the games leading up to it. The way that there was two worlds, another one that just kind of popped up, and it was nothing leading to the fact that that was going to happen until you pretty much got there, and to find out that the whole map has been... I've always liked that in games. I liked it in Digimon World 3 too, where you just got to go to a totally different server that was like the same one but with some differences and a different color scheme. I don't know, I'm a kind of sucker for that for some reason. And the story and the gameplay and the items and the bosses and just the dungeons and the puzzles and everything just hit. Even when I was a kid, this game, it hit. But it wasn't so hard to the point where I thought I soft locked and got mad and couldn't beat the game. And this brought me back into Zelda, which I think then pretty quickly led into what the number one spot will be.
Gotcha. So how about we get to them number one spots?
And number one. I noticed no one said it yet.
I guess we all got the same one then.
Yes, we all got it.
I mean,
you wanna glaze on that OOT first, Mayo? Tell us what you like about it.
all right, I'll talk it up. I'll talk this boy up. So, Ocarina of Time for me was not the first Zelda game that I ever played. That would be Majora's Mask. I believe I got Majora's Mask from a garage sale, if I'm not wrong. And
He got that Ben Drown edition.
no, I'm sorry. The first Zelda game I ever played was actually The Legend of Zelda. My mom had it, and she would play it on the Nintendo. But I never played it because I was like 4. So I never actually got to play it. Once I was done playing Majora's Mask, Ocarina of Time was the next game I actually had bought in the Zelda series, Wind Waker being the third. I never had a handheld, so I never actually got to experience any of the like Oracle or Link to the Past on Super Nintendo or any of the GBA games. So yeah, Ocarina of Time is just that. It's just him. It's him of Zelda. It's the hymn of Zelda. I mean, it's the OG. It's the first 3D game. Ocarina of Time, I mean, if you take all the mechanics they added and just kind of push past the norm of what video games were then, you take all that aside, the story hits, the story is fun, the different landscapes they made is fun. Can you just go back to the game and like whenever you want, just start playing it again? Yes. All the dungeons are just so good. The level design is good. It's such a touch to the game that I honestly feel like they literally sat through like every room in every dungeon and was like, does this make sense? Like, it's that good. They didn't just like rush through it. So for me, so far, this is number one because it is just the hymn of Zelda.
Obviously, I agree. This is number one, Ocarina of Time, right? The story is so much of what I love about this game. I mean, the mechanics, sure. I mean, I can never forget my first time hook shotting across the roofs in Kakariko, realizing that you could use the hook shots on the roofs in Kakariko. Like, just stuff like that just felt amazing. Being able to go back and learn some speedrunning hacks and stuff, like, that was kind of cool. But I think that the truth is just like the story it has my heart. Like the fact that they came up with like every sage had its own dual story, like one when you're a kid and one when you're an adult. Like you meet them all ahead of time. Like they all have their own arcs, their own peoples, their own backgrounds that you can actually dig into and learn about. Everything in this game felt intentional. And honestly, like the fact that they did that with their first 3D game is just outstanding to me. Cause like they could have just been figuring out, okay, what are the mechanics going to be in a 3D game, and how is the camera going to work, and how is whatever. Like, it was one of the first like projects that was even like this in gaming, and yet they still managed to make it a really meaningful story as well, which like they didn't have to do. Like it could have just been straight up 3D. Let's just rip one of our other 2D titles, not even create a new story, and just have Link be 3D, and that would blow everyone's mind. But they didn't. They actually dug in, came up with a lot of details to kind of add in, a lot of conversations to have with NPCs to explain things in the world. And like, yeah, the level design is incredible. Like, everything is intentional. Everything works the way it's supposed to. I mean, I know that people kind of spend time just trying to find new ways to break the game, but you know, the fact that it's even that consistent of a system where you can kind of predict and find new ways through things, is really cool. I mean, I already spent a whole season talking about all the stuff I love, but one thing I do want to mention is just like, because they didn't have other 3D Zeldas to call back to, this is also one of the games that relies most heavily on outside inspiration. So, like, instead of having Majora's Mask or Majora's Mask or Wind Waker that like are considered direct sequels to Ocarina of Time, or having Twilight Princess where they're talking about the old hero a whole bunch, or you know, Breath of the Wild, even, where every location is named after some other Zelda title. This one didn't have any of that. It didn't have anything to kind of lean back on. So instead, you just saw like a whole new kind of story being told. And if you saw outside inspiration, it was from other stories about like time passing and aging, and like the whole concept of like the 7-year shift that Link was going through internally. And that to me was such a cool artistic like direction to take the game in, that I feel like it's just a masterpiece that it's kind of hard for other games to stand up to it because of that. Like, it's its own original thing, and that to me is just is why I put it at number 1. And it's going to be hard for anything to knock it out of that spot for me personally.
How am I supposed to get glazing when y'all have 3 pounds of glaze on this game already over here? Being last in line at the glazing contest is tough stuff. This was the first 3D Zelda game. This game hit. This game looked phenomenal for the time. I played it first on GameCube where it was up-resed. Like, it looked a little bit better. So I'm not sure about the N64. I'm sure at the time that also was like mind-exploding graphics. I don't really know how the camera did on the N64. Wasn't it made in the same engine as Mario 64?
Yeah.
And I absolutely hate the camera in Mario 64, and it's the one thing that keeps me away from that game entirely. So if the camera was like that, I can't defend that. But on the GameCube version, it was great. The camera was great. The 3D was great. Seeing Zelda for the first time in my life, going from A Link to the Past and how much fun I had in that game, and seeing it almost like in the sense of maybe like a cinema shot where you're in the sky and you kind of zoom down to the ground and even out and you're in the eyes of Link. It was like mind-blowing as a kid my age, probably, oh goodness. What would you think, guys? Like 12 to 14? Younger?
The game probably came out when you was 6.
I mean, yeah, but that was on the system I didn't have.
Right.
So we know that Wind Waker came out in 2002, so like 2000 out. Okay, so like 8 to 10 probably when I played this for the first time. So to my 8 to 10 year old brain, this was ooh wee, you know. Going from being a kid, 3 dungeons, having a different style of gameplay, getting the Hylian shield and having to bend over and having it feel really super awkward for like 1 or 2 dungeons, the second one being optional, you can switch it back, to turning into an adult and being able to fully wield that and seeing the way the entire landscape and everything in it transformed when somebody that misused power got into a position like that where summon monsters, and like just seeing everyone go from being happy and getting along, and the soldiers are just having fun standing around. There's nothing to even guard here, guys. Everything's great. 7 years later, everything's on fire. Monsters everywhere. The way that I don't know. It's almost like you were in a fairy tale in the beginning, and then as soon as you grow up, everything just was not very good, and you had to go fix it. There were.
Kind of like real life.
I tried to tone it back there at the end for a second. The Forest Temple being the first adult dungeon was so good. The music, I will never forget the music of walking into that dungeon and fighting that first Wolfos, and then forgetting about the key that nobody probably knew in the beginning was up there, and then having to find that later. The entire puzzles and everything in the Forest Temple, I don't know, I just remember that temple really well compared to all the rest of them. And then, you go to Water Temple and a cat hissing noises because, when I was younger, that temple, everyone just didn't like that one. That one was a toughie.
Yeah.
Into the Shadow Temple that was even, like, getting to the point of being almost scary with the stuff that was going on in it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It covered so many different things, and it did it all in a way that was kid-friendly, but also, even when you're older, could still be found to be informative and a little bit of a social commentary, maybe even a little scary.
Sure.
On top of the amazing story as well. But I mean, you guys already glazed that, so,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good game.
I had like a thought while you were talking.
Except blue bubbles. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. I had a thought while you were talking, Fonz, that you were kind of saying like, it was like the 3D Zelda that they made their own story. It wasn't just a rehash, but just imagine for a second, like a Link to the Past in the epic proportions of how a Link to the Past was. And I'm not saying they should have replaced Ocarina of Time, but imagine if they ever just make like an Ocarina of Time-esque The Link to the Past. That'd be so good.
I mean, yeah. They could do it.
That would be mind-blowing. Oh, man.
I mean, I wouldn't want to fight Mothula like that, but I'm sure they'll figure it out.
That would be brutal.
I don't know if I would want to see it in the same style as Echoes of Wisdom and Link's Awakening remake, though.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm the biggest fan of that style.
No, I was meaning like an actual like Ocarina of Time, or even like you could just do like like Skyward Sword kind of level of like graphic, like that kind of 3D, not an eagle view.
It would definitely take a little redesigning because the game kind of heavily plays into the screen swapping thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're talking about a 3D game, there probably wouldn't be none of that. So they would have to, not reimagine the whole map because stuff could still be in the same place, but they'd have to like generate a whole map based on the old one. It wouldn't be as easy of a remake, I feel like, as the other ones they've done, like Link's Awakening.
Okay. Yeah, I have no idea what that would look like. It
would be really cool though.
Yeah.
Going into the dark world in a 3D game.
Yeah. We've never done that before.
Be a giant man-sized bunny in 3D hopping up the mountain.
Yeah.
Well, we hour 45 in. We probably wrap her up.
I know. I was just gonna try to wrap it up. All right. So yeah, I don't know what that would look like, but we could talk about that another time. For now, we're gonna end this episode. So y'all, thank you so much for listening to our rank and recap and our soft introduction to the Wind Waker. Hope you guys can join us for this season up ahead. I know we're all excited to be talking about this cherished game from our youth. So hope y'all can catch us next time. But for now, Peace out, y'all. Catch you next time on A for No, B for Yes.
Remember your anonymity while you're sailing the high seas.
Did you get all that?